She sat quietly in 14A, just another passenger sipping water and reading. When the captain collapsed at 35,000 feet, F-22 fighters rushed to escort them. Then the impossible happened. "Phoenix, we need you in the cockpit," crackled the radio. How did they know her secret call sign? Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Lieutenant Colonel Jessica Phoenix Carter sat in seat 14A of American Airlines Flight 1205, looking like any other business traveler flying from Los Angeles to Atlanta on a Friday afternoon in October 2025. She wore a simple black blazer, white blouse, and carried a basic laptop bag. Her dark hair was pulled back in a professional bun, and she appeared to be in her mid-30s, just another passenger among the 180 people aboard the Boeing 767. The flight attendant, Mark, offered her a complimentary drink. "What can I get you today?" he asked with practiced politeness. "Just water, please," Jessica replied with a quiet smile. She had learned long ago that airline alcohol and flying didn't mix well, even when she wasn't the one in the cockpit. The businessman next to her, Robert Chin, was working on his laptop and making small talk. "Business trip?" he asked casually. "Something like that," Jessica answered, not wanting to elaborate. The truth was more complicated than Robert could imagine. She was traveling to Atlanta for a classified debriefing at Dobbins Air Reserve Base, but her cover story was that she worked as a defense contractor consultant. What Robert didn't know was that the quiet woman beside him was one of the most skilled fighter pilots in the United States Air Force. Jessica Phoenix Carter had flown over 150 combat missions in F-22 Raptor stealth fighters. She had shot down enemy aircraft, destroyed ground targets, and led air superiority missions in some of the most dangerous airspace in the world. Her call sign Phoenix came from an incident over Syria where her F-22 had been severely damaged by enemy fire. Most pilots would have ejected, but Jessica managed to nurse the wounded aircraft back to friendly territory, landing at a forward operating base with multiple system failures. Like the mythical bird, she had risen from what should have been destruction. But sitting in 14A, drinking water and reading a magazine, Jessica looked like any other professional woman traveling for work. No one on the aircraft had any reason to suspect they were flying with one of the most elite pilots in military aviation. 2 hours into the flight, as they cruised over Texas at 35,000 feet, Captain Michael Rodriguez felt a sudden sharp pain in his chest. The 52-year-old pilot had been flying commercial aircraft for over 20 years, but he had never experienced anything like this crushing sensation that made it difficult to breathe. "Tom," he said to First Officer Tom Williams, "I'm not feeling well. Take the controls." First Officer Williams immediately took control of the aircraft while Captain Rodriguez tried to assess his condition. The pain was getting worse and he was beginning to feel dizzy and nauseous. "Mike, what's wrong?" Williams asked, concerned by his captain's pale complexion and labored breathing. "Chest pain," Rodriguez gasped. "Really bad. I think I need medical attention." Williams immediately activated the aircraft's emergency medical kit and called for any doctors aboard the flight. Dr. Sarah Kim, a cardiologist returning from a medical conference, responded quickly to the call for assistance. After examining Captain Rodriguez, Dr. Kim's face showed grave concern. "He's having a heart attack," she told First Officer Williams quietly. "His pulse is irregular and his blood pressure is dropping. He needs immediate medical attention." "Can you stabilize him?" Williams asked. "I can try, but he needs to get to a hospital as soon as possible." First Officer Williams found himself facing a crisis that every pilot trains for but hopes never to experience. He was now the only qualified pilot aboard an aircraft carrying 180 passengers, and they were still hours away from their destination. First Officer Williams immediately contacted Air Traffic Control to declare a medical emergency. "Atlanta Center, American 1205 declaring emergency. We have pilot incapacitation and need immediate assistance." American 1205, Atlanta Center copies your emergency. "What is your pilot situation?" Atlanta Center, we have one pilot down with apparent heart attack. I am First Officer Williams and I am now sole pilot. Requesting immediate clearance to nearest suitable airport. As the emergency unfolded, Atlanta Center began coordinating with military assets in the area. When a commercial aircraft declares an emergency with pilot incapacitation, standard protocol includes scrambling military fighters to provide escort and assistance if needed. Within minutes, 2 F-22 Raptor fighters from the 1st Fighter Wing at Joint Base Langley Eustis in Virginia were airborne and climbing rapidly toward the emergency aircraft. Major David "Shark" Thompson and Captain Lisa "Viper" Rodriguez were experienced F-22 pilots who had performed civilian aircraft escorts before. Atlanta Center, Raptor 1 and Raptor 2 airborne and climbing to intercept American 1205, Major Thompson transmitted. Raptor flight, American 1205 is at flight level 350, heading 090, approximately 200 miles southwest of Atlanta. Single pilot aboard with medical emergency in cockpit. As the F-22s approached their intercept point, they prepared for what they expected to be a routine escort mission. They would provide visual assistance to the airliner and relay communications if needed, helping guide the aircraft to a safe landing at the nearest suitable airport. But this routine mission was about to become something unprecedented in military aviation history. As the F-22s took position alongside American Flight 1205, Atlanta Center began reviewing the passenger manifest as part of standard emergency procedures. Sometimes commercial flights carry off-duty pilots, air marshals, or other personnel who might assist during emergencies. Raptor 1 Atlanta Center, came the transmission. We're reviewing the passenger manifest for American 1205. We show a Lieutenant Colonel Jessica Carter aboard. Are you familiar with that name? In the cockpit of Raptor 1, Major Thompson's eyes widened in disbelief. Say again, Atlanta Center. Did you say Lieutenant Colonel Jessica Carter? Affirmative, Raptor 1. Lieutenant Colonel Jessica Carter, seat 14A. Captain Rodriguez, flying Raptor 2, immediately understood the significance. Shark, did they just say Phoenix Carter is on that plane? Major Thompson's voice carried a mixture of awe and excitement. Atlanta Center, can you confirm the identity? Is this Lieutenant Colonel Jessica Phoenix Carter from the 1st Fighter Wing? There was a brief pause while air traffic control verified the information. Raptor 1 confirmed. Lieutenant Colonel Jessica Carter, call sign Phoenix, currently assigned to classified operations out of Langley. Both F-22 pilots knew exactly who Jessica Carter was, even though they had never flown with her directly. In the tight-knit community of F-22 pilots, Phoenix was a legend. She had more air-to-air kills than any active pilot, had developed tactics that were taught at the Air Force Weapons School, and had survived combat situations that would have destroyed lesser pilots. Atlanta Center, Raptor 1, Major Thompson transmitted. We need to establish direct communication with Lieutenant Colonel Carter immediately. Inside American Flight 1205, the emergency was escalating. Captain Rodriguez's condition was deteriorating despite Dr. Kim's efforts, and First Officer Williams was struggling with the psychological pressure of being the only pilot aboard a large commercial aircraft. I've never been pilot in command of a 767, Williams admitted to the flight attendants. I can fly the aircraft, but landing in these conditions, I need help. The weather at Atlanta's airport was becoming marginal, with strong crosswinds and occasional thunderstorms that would challenge even experienced pilots. Williams knew his limitations, and he was honest enough to admit that he might not have the skills needed to safely land the aircraft in deteriorating conditions. It was then that the radio crackled with a transmission that changed everything. American 1205, this is Raptor 1. We understand you have Lieutenant Colonel Jessica Carter aboard your aircraft. We need to speak with Phoenix immediately. In seat 14A, Jessica heard her call sign over the aircraft's communication system and felt her heart skip a beat. Her cover as an anonymous business traveler had just been blown by military pilots who somehow knew her identity. The businessman beside her, Robert, stared at her with confusion. Did they just call you Phoenix? Are you military? Before Jessica could answer, First Officer Williams' voice came over the intercom. Lieutenant Colonel Carter, this is First Officer Williams. Could you please come to the cockpit immediately? We need your assistance. Every passenger on the aircraft turned to look at Jessica as she unbuckled her seatbelt and made her way toward the front of the aircraft. The quiet business traveler in 14A was suddenly revealed to be something entirely different. As Jessica entered the cockpit of American Flight 1205, she immediately assessed the situation with the trained eye of someone who had spent thousands of hours in high-stress aviation environments. Captain Rodriguez was unconscious, Dr. Kim was monitoring his vital signs, and First Officer Williams looked overwhelmed by the responsibility of commanding the aircraft alone. What's our situation? Jessica asked Williams, her voice calm and authoritative. Captain Rodriguez had a heart attack about 30 minutes ago, Williams explained. I'm qualified on the 767, but I've never been pilot in command. Weather at Atlanta is deteriorating, and I'm not sure I can handle the approach in these conditions. Jessica looked at the instrument panel and quickly analyzed their position, fuel state, weather conditions and available options. Her experience flying the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world had taught her to process complex information rapidly and make critical decisions under pressure. "How much fuel do we have?" she asked. "About 2 hours at current consumption rate," Williams replied. "What alternates are available?" "Charleston, Savannah, and Jacksonville all have better weather, but they're further away." Jessica made a decision that demonstrated why she had earned her reputation as one of the Air Force's best pilots. "We're going to Atlanta," she said firmly. "The weather is marginal but manageable. You're going to fly this approach and I'm going to help you." "Raptor 1, this is Phoenix," Jessica transmitted on the emergency frequency. "I'm in the cockpit of American 1205 and assessing the situation." "Phoenix, Raptor 1. Ma'am, it's an honor to be working with you. What do you need from us?" Jessica's response demonstrated the tactical thinking that had made her legendary in the F-22 community. "Raptor Flight, I need you to provide weather updates, runway conditions and vectors for our approach. Also coordinate with Atlanta Tower for priority handling." "Roger, Phoenix. We have you covered." What happened next was unprecedented in civilian aviation. A commercial airliner was effectively being commanded by a fighter pilot while being escorted by two of the most advanced military aircraft ever built. Jessica used her combat experience to coordinate between the civilian aircraft and military escorts in ways that civilian air traffic control had never seen. "First Officer Williams," Jessica said, "you're going to fly this aircraft exactly as you've been trained. I'm going to handle communications, navigation, and approach planning. Trust your training and follow my instructions." Williams felt his confidence return as he recognized the voice of absolute authority and competence. This wasn't just any pilot helping him. This was someone who had commanded aircraft in life and death situations that made this emergency look manageable. "Phoenix, Raptor 2, came Captain Rodriguez's transmission. We're showing deteriorating weather at Atlanta. Recommend diverting to Charleston." "Negative, Raptor 2, Jessica replied. "Atlanta has the best medical facilities for our patient. We're going in." As American Flight 1205 began its descent toward Atlanta, Jessica coordinated the approach with the precision of a military operation. She had First Officer Williams configure the aircraft for landing while she managed communications with air traffic control, the F-22 escorts, and ground emergency personnel. "Atlanta Tower, American 1205 Heavy, emergency aircraft inbound with medical emergency," she transmitted. "Request direct approach runway 26 right with emergency equipment standing by." "American 1205 Atlanta Tower. You're cleared direct runway 26 right. Emergency equipment is positioned and ready. Winds 280 at 15 gusting to 25. The crosswinds were at the edge of the aircraft's operating limitations, but Jessica had landed damaged F-22s in worse conditions. She knew that with proper technique and steady nerves, the approach was manageable. "First Officer Williams," she said calmly, "I'm going to talk you through this approach step by step. The winds are strong but we can handle them. Trust the aircraft and trust your training." As they descended through the clouds, Jessica provided constant guidance while Williams flew the aircraft. Her experience in high-stress situations kept both pilots focused on the task at hand rather than the consequences of failure. "Phoenix, Raptor 1, Major Thompson transmitted. You're looking good on approach. We have you in sight and are monitoring your descent." "Thanks, Raptor 1. Maintain escort position until we're on the ground." The approach to Atlanta's runway 26 right was one of the most challenging that First Officer Williams had ever attempted. The crosswinds required constant corrections, and the stress of being responsible for 180 lives was enormous. But with Jessica's guidance, he flew the approach with steady precision. "Power back slightly," Jessica instructed as they passed through 500 feet. "Left rudder to counter the wind drift." "You're doing great." At 200 feet, a gust of wind pushed the aircraft to the right of the runway centerline. Williams began to panic, but Jessica's calm voice kept him focused. "Easy correction to the left. Use the rudder, not the ailerons. You've got this." The Boeing 767 touched down on the runway with a slight side load from the crosswind, but Williams managed to keep the aircraft centered and under control. As they rolled out, emergency vehicles followed them down the runway, ready to provide immediate medical attention to Captain Rodriguez. "American 1205, excellent job," Atlanta Tower transmitted. "Emergency equipment is standing by." In the passenger cabin, 180 people applauded the safe landing, most of them unaware that they owed their lives to the quiet woman who had been sitting in seat 14A reading a magazine just hours earlier. As American Flight 1205 came to a stop at the gate, the F-22 escorts performed a ceremonial flyby, a tribute normally reserved for heads of state or fallen heroes. Major Thompson and Captain Rodriguez wanted to honor the pilot who had saved 180 lives using skills learned in a completely different type of aircraft. Phoenix, Raptor 1, Major Thompson transmitted. That was outstanding airmanship. You just reminded us why the F-22 community considers you a legend. Thanks, Raptor Flight, Jessica replied. Just another day at the office. But it wasn't just another day. What Jessica had accomplished was extraordinary by any measure. She had taken command of a civilian aircraft during a medical emergency, coordinated with military escorts, and guided a less experienced pilot through one of the most challenging approaches possible. As passengers deplaned, many of them stopped to thank Jessica personally. Robert Chin, the businessman who had been sitting beside her, was among the last to leave. I can't believe I was sitting next to a fighter pilot this whole time, he said. Why didn't you tell me? Jessica smiled. Because I was just a passenger until I wasn't. Within hours of the emergency landing, news of the incident spread across aviation and military communities. The story of a fighter pilot who had saved a commercial flight while traveling as a passenger captured the imagination of people around the world. F-22 pilot saves commercial flight, read the headlines. Phoenix rises again, wrote aviation bloggers who understood the significance of her call sign. But Jessica tried to deflect the attention, insisting that First Officer Williams deserved the credit for successfully landing the aircraft. I just provided guidance, she told reporters at the Atlanta airport. Tom Williams is the one who flew that approach and saved 180 lives. Williams, however, was quick to correct that narrative. Lieutenant Colonel Carter took command of an impossible situation and made it manageable, he told the media. Without her expertise, I don't know if we would have made it down safely. The F-22 pilots who had escorted the flight also spoke to aviation media about Jessica's performance. Phoenix demonstrated why she's considered one of the best pilots in the Air Force, Major Thompson said. She adapted her fighter pilot skills to a completely different aircraft and emergency situation. It was remarkable to witness. As with all aviation emergencies, the incident involving American Flight 1205 was thoroughly investigated by the Federal Aviation Administration, the National Transportation Safety Board, and military authorities. The investigation revealed details about Jessica's actions that made her performance even more impressive. Lieutenant Colonel Carter had never flown a Boeing 767 before, reported lead investigator Sarah Martinez. She was familiar with the aircraft's systems from her technical training, but she had no hands-on experience with commercial aviation procedures. Yet she coordinated the emergency response with the expertise of a veteran airline captain. The investigation also revealed that Jessica's decision to continue to Atlanta rather than diverting to an alternate airport had saved Captain Rodriguez's life. The delay involved in flying to a more distant airport with better weather would have prevented him from receiving the immediate cardiac care he needed. Her tactical decision-making was flawless, the investigation report concluded. She correctly assessed that the challenging approach to Atlanta was less risky than the medical consequences of flying to an alternate airport. Captain Rodriguez made a full recovery and returned to flying after completing cardiac rehabilitation. He credited Jessica's quick decision-making with saving his life. The incident aboard American Flight 1205 had consequences that extended far beyond that single flight. Airlines began reviewing their procedures for utilizing military pilots who might be traveling as passengers during emergencies. We realized that we had been overlooking a valuable resource, said American Airlines Chief Pilot Captain Patricia Wong. Military pilots traveling on our aircraft have skills and experience that could be invaluable during certain types of emergencies. The Air Force also began studying Jessica's actions to understand how fighter pilot training could be adapted to civilian aviation emergencies. Her ability to rapidly assess an unfamiliar aircraft and coordinate complex emergency procedures demonstrated principles that could be taught to other military pilots. Lieutenant Colonel Carter's performance shows us that the fundamental skills of military aviation, decision-making under pressure, situational awareness, communication, are transferable to civilian aircraft, said Colonel James Mitchell, who led the Air Force's analysis of the incident. The incident also inspired changes in pilot training programs. Flight schools began incorporating more cross-training between military and civilian aviation procedures, recognizing that pilots might need to adapt their skills to unfamiliar aircraft in emergency situations. 2 weeks after the incident, Jessica returned to her regular duties at Joint Base Langley Eustis. But her experience aboard American Flight 1205 had changed her perspective on military aviation and its relationship to civilian flying. "I realized that all aviation is connected," she told her squadron mates during a debrief. "The skills we learn flying F-22s aren't just useful in combat, they're useful anytime people need help in the air." Her commanding officer, Colonel Sarah Davis, asked Jessica to develop a training program that would help other military pilots understand how their skills could be adapted to civilian aviation emergencies. "What you did on that commercial flight was extraordinary," Colonel Davis said. "But the principles you used, rapid assessment, clear communication, coordinated teamwork, those are things we can teach other pilots." Jessica accepted the assignment with enthusiasm. She began working with civilian aviation authorities to develop cross-training programs that would help military pilots understand commercial aircraft systems and procedures. "The goal isn't to turn fighter pilots into airline pilots," she explained to a group of Air Force officers. "The goal is to help them understand how their existing skills can be applied in civilian aviation emergencies." 6 months after the American Flight 1205 incident, Jessica was teaching a special course at the Air Force Test Pilot School. Her students were experienced military pilots who were learning about the intersection between military and civilian aviation. "The most important lesson from Flight 1205, she told her students, is that adaptation is a core pilot skill. When I walked into that cockpit, I had never flown a 767. But I understood the fundamental principles of aviation, and I could communicate with pilots who did have 767 experience." She used the incident to illustrate broader principles about leadership, decision-making, and crisis management. "First Officer Williams was perfectly capable of landing that aircraft," she explained. "What he needed wasn't someone to take over, he needed someone to help him organize the crisis, prioritize the challenges, and maintain confidence in his own abilities." The students, all experienced military pilots themselves, understood the significance of what Jessica had accomplished. "Ma'am," asked Captain Robert Kim, an F-16 pilot, "how did you know that your fighter pilot experience would translate to a commercial emergency?" "I didn't," Jessica replied honestly. "But I knew that pilots help pilots regardless of what aircraft they're flying. When someone needs help in the air, you don't worry about whether you're qualified, you worry about how you can best use your skills to help." 2 years later, Jessica was promoted to colonel and assigned to command the 1st Operations Group at Joint Base Langley Eustis. Her new position made her responsible for all F-22 operations on the East Coast, but she continued to teach the cross-training program she had developed. The program had become a model for military-civilian aviation cooperation. Airlines now had protocols for identifying and utilizing military pilots during emergencies, and military pilots received training on civilian aviation procedures and aircraft systems. Colonel Carter's actions aboard Flight 1205 opened our eyes to possibilities we had never considered, said FAA Administrator Jennifer Walsh. "Military pilots travel on commercial aircraft every day. Now we have ways to use their expertise when emergencies occur." The incident had also inspired a new generation of pilots who understood that their skills had applications beyond their primary aircraft assignments. "Phoenix showed us that being a pilot means being ready to help whenever and wherever flying is involved," said Captain Lisa Chin, one of Jessica's former students who now taught at the Air Force Academy. Major Thompson and Captain Rodriguez, the F-22 pilots who had escorted Flight 1205, continued to serve as advocates for the cross-training program Jessica had developed. "Working with Phoenix during that emergency was one of the highlights of my career," Major Thompson said. "She demonstrated what it means to be a pilot's pilot, someone who puts the safety of flight above everything else." Despite the recognition and career advancement that followed the Flight 1205 incident, Jessica remained fundamentally unchanged. She continued to fly regularly, maintained her combat readiness, and insisted that she had simply done what any pilot would do in similar circumstances. "I was in the right place at the right time with the right skills," she told a journalist who was writing a book about aviation heroes. Hundreds of military pilots could have done the same thing. But her colleagues disagreed. They understood that Jessica's performance had required not just technical skills, but leadership, judgment, and the ability to remain calm under pressure while lives hung in the balance. "Phoenix has always been exceptional," said Colonel Davis, her former commanding officer. "The Flight 1205 incident just gave the civilian world a chance to see what we in the military have always known about her." The passengers from Flight 1205 never forgot the woman who had appeared in their cockpit during their moment of greatest need. Many of them stayed in touch with Jessica, sending cards and letters of gratitude that she kept in her office. Robert Chin, the businessman who had been sitting beside her, sent her a Christmas card every year. "Thank you for reminding me that heroes often sit in the seat next to us," he wrote in one of them. 5 years after American Flight 1205's emergency landing, Colonel Jessica Phoenix Carter was selected for promotion to Brigadier General. The ceremony took place at Joint Base Langley Eustis, with attendees including many of the people whose lives had been touched by her actions that day. First Officer Tom Williams, now a captain with American Airlines, spoke at the ceremony. "General Carter taught me that being a pilot means being part of a community that transcends military and civilian boundaries," he said. "When pilots are in trouble, other pilots help. It's that simple." Captain Rodriguez, who had survived his heart attack and returned to flying, also attended the ceremony. "General Carter saved my life and the lives of 179 other people," he said. "But more than that, she showed us what military service really means, being ready to serve others whenever and wherever you're needed." The F-22 pilots who had escorted Flight 1205 were also present. Major Thompson, now a lieutenant colonel, presented Jessica with a plaque signed by every F-22 pilot in the Air Force. "General Carter embodies everything we aspire to be as military aviators," he said. "Skilled, courageous, and always ready to put others before herself." As Jessica accepted her new rank, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from Seat 14A to General Officer. The incident aboard Flight 1205 had changed her life, but it had also reminded her why she had chosen military service in the first place. "Being a pilot is about more than flying aircraft," she told the assembled crowd. "It's about being ready to use your skills in service of others, whether you're in an F-22 over hostile territory or in the cockpit of a commercial airliner during an emergency." She gestured toward the audience, which included military pilots, airline crews, and passengers from Flight 1205. "Every person in this room understands that aviation is ultimately about bringing people home safely. That mission doesn't change whether you're wearing a military uniform or an airline uniform. We're all part of the same community, with the same commitment to safety and service." Today, Brigadier General Jessica Phoenix Carter continues to serve in the Air Force, now as commander of the Air Combat Command's fighter operations. The cross-training program she developed has become standard throughout the military, and her actions aboard Flight 1205 continue to inspire pilots in both military and civilian aviation. She still travels occasionally as a passenger on commercial flights, usually sitting quietly in economy class, reading a magazine or working on her laptop. But now flight crews recognize her name when they see it on passenger manifests, and they take comfort in knowing that if an emergency develops, they have one of the most capable pilots in the world sitting in their passenger cabin. The story of American Flight 1205 has become legendary in aviation circles, not because a military pilot helped save a civilian aircraft, but because it demonstrated the bonds that connect all aviators in their shared commitment to bringing people home safely. And sometimes, late at night when F-22s are flying training missions over the Virginia coast, young pilots still talk about Phoenix, the legendary fighter pilot who proved that heroism often sits quietly in Seat 14A, waiting for the moment when ordinary passengers must become something extraordinary. This story celebrates the universal bonds between all pilots and the way military training can serve civilian needs during emergencies, showing how heroes often travel anonymously among us until circumstances call them to action.